My daughter looked right at me that night in front of everyone and joked as if my years of sacrifice were nothing but a punchline. I felt the sting deep inside, but I kept my chin high. I had endured worse storms in silence. Instead of breaking, I chose my moment to remind her that respect never goes out of style. And trust me, what happened next was only the beginning of a reckoning no one expected. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, their crystals scattering light across the white linen tables. Waiters in pressed uniforms floated by with trays of champagne, and the hum of conversation rose as guests streamed in through the glass doors. I stood near the entrance, my dress chosen carefully weeks before, and watched them marvel at the decorations. Flowers draped the archways, silver cutlery gleamed under the lights, and music played softly from a string quartet. Every detail had been hand-picked, and every bill had been paid by me. Yet not one person who walked through those doors looked at me as if I belonged to this night. I smiled politely at a passing couple who complimented the floral arrangements, their words directed at my daughter as she greeted them. Callista beamed her arms open wide to receive their praise. I remained in the background, invisible, but knowing the credit card statements told a different story. Quiet pride warmed me, but beneath it an unease stirred. I had told myself this celebration would be my gift, my chance to stand beside her as she turned 30. But already in the first minutes of the evening, it felt as if my role had been erased. When the crowd thinned at the chart stand, I moved closer to check my seat. The display was grand names written in gold calligraphy across black cards arranged neatly in rows. I ran my eyes over the list until I found my own. My stomach tightened. My name had been misspelled, the last letters wrong, and instead of being near the head table, I was placed at the far end of the room near the exit. I pressed my lips together, a smile stretching too tight across my face. It was a simple mistake, someone might say, but it cut deep. To see my own identity twisted and pushed aside when all of this existed because of me was a stab I hadn't braced for. I turned away from the chart, fighting the urge to let my shoulders sag. Inside, humiliation pressed hard, but outside, I forced composure. Guests continued to arrive, their chatter filling the room. No one noticed my hands tightening around the small clutch I carried. I walked slowly to the table assigned to me, each step deliberate, as though dragging the weight of the truth that no one else cared to acknowledge. The seat they gave me overlooked the dance floor, but far enough that I could feel the separation. From there, I could see Callista, glowing under the lights. She laughed with her friends, her voice high and sweet, and she offered thanks to each guest who had come. Not once did her eyes search for me in the crowd. I rested my hands on the tablecloth and straightened the fork in front of me. Around me, the guests assigned to my table spoke in polite tones, asking about the weather, about traffic, about how beautiful the ballroom looked. Their words were kind but distant, as if I were just another attendee, not the woman who had written the checks. I watched my daughter raise a glass in greeting to one of her colleagues, her smile flawless, her posture perfect. She had grown into a woman admired for her elegance, and I wanted to feel joy. Yet the ache in my chest deepened with every passing moment. I wondered if she even realized I was here, or if she wanted me to vanish into the shadows as neatly as my name had been misplaced. The conversation at my table drifted toward memories of vacations and business ventures. No one thought to ask me how I knew Callista or what role I played tonight, and I did not volunteer it. I simply nodded, listening, wearing the mask of small talk, while my heart whispered the truth only I knew. I remembered the overtime shifts, the holidays spent working, the savings chipped away to create this one night. I thought of the nights I stayed up late balancing bills, the silent promises I made to myself that one day she would see me not just as her mother, but as the person who never stopped giving. I lifted my glass of water, letting the cool rim rest against my lip without drinking. Around me, laughter rose and music swelled as the evening settled into motion. Still, I remained unseen, a quiet figure at the edge of my own daughter's celebration. In that moment, I realized tonight might not bring the acknowledgement I had hoped for. It might only bring me the lesson that love and sacrifice do not always guarantee a seat at the table where you belong. As I forced a smile, Callista pulled me aside with a warning I never expected. "Mom, please don't embarrass me tonight by talking about money or sacrifices. It's my night." Callista's whisper cut sharper than the clink of crystal glasses behind her. Her hand rested firmly on my arm, guiding me away from the corridor where we had paused. Her smile was flawless for anyone watching, but her eyes were steely. I stared at her disbelief settling like a stone in my chest. I opened my mouth, then closed it. To argue now in front of her friends and fiancé would mean chaos. So I nodded slightly, forcing composure while my insides burned. In one sentence, my voice had been taken from me. I returned to the table, the chatter swelling around me. Waiters served wine and laughter rippled across the ballroom. I sat among acquaintances who spoke about their summer plans and admired the decor. My daughter floated between groups, radiant under the chandeliers. Every time she laughed, her friends leaned in closer, as if she were the only light in the room. My presence faded into the shadows, not because of the dimness of the hall, but because she had asked me to remain silent. I smiled when someone glanced my way, but no one asked about my role in this evening. It was easier to assume I was just another guest, maybe a distant relative. Underneath my calm nods, a quiet storm brewed, anger simmering, but held beneath layers of restraint. Later, the lights dimmed slightly and an usher rolled in a velvet-covered box. Callista clapped her hands with delight, and the crowd gathered near as she opened it. Nestled inside was a diamond necklace catching the light in brilliant flashes. Gasps filled the room. She lifted it carefully and Avon stepped forward grinning as though the treasure were his gift to her. "He's so thoughtful," someone whispered behind me. "She's lucky to have him." My heart clenched. I knew the truth. Every cent of that necklace had been charged to my card. I had picked it out weeks ago, imagining the moment she would wear it, never picturing she'd erase me with a single gesture. Callista slipped it around her neck, her smile radiant as she kissed Avon's cheek. The applause rose, and in the noise, the sting of betrayal echoed louder than any cheer. My gift had been stolen in plain sight, my role rewritten as if I had never existed. I forced a smile, my lips trembling against the weight of silence. Compliments drifted across the table, all directed at Avon. Guests leaned toward me, murmuring about his generosity, about how men these days rarely thought of such extravagant tokens. I nodded politely, though each word felt like a nail driven deeper. No one realized that I had been the one behind the gesture. No one cared. My sacrifices had been erased not only in private whispers, but now in the bright light of public adoration. Inside, I told myself this was only the beginning. If I could endure this cut, I could endure more. But I also knew something was unraveling. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of love between mother and daughter, yet here I sat, invisible, silenced, and stripped of acknowledgement. The humiliation thickened around me like smoke, and still I sat upright, smiling, holding every tear back. I thought the worst was over until the toasts began and laughter turned against me. Dinner was being served, the lights dimming just enough to make the chandeliers glow like stars above us. Plates clattered softly as servers moved between tables, setting down salmon vegetables and rolls. The mood in the room was light, warm, expectant. I watched as Zinnia, Callista's best friend, rose with her glass raised high. She looked around the ballroom with a mischievous grin. I've known Callista since high school. She began, her voice carrying clearly over the music that had faded into silence. Guests leaned in, ready for a toast filled with laughter and love. At first it was charming. She recalled sleepovers, road trips, and Callista's college days. Laughter trickled easily through the room as people listened. But then her tone shifted. "And let's not forget Callista's mom and her little projects," Zinnia added, drawing out the words with a smirk. always chasing some new dream, always dabbling here and there. A few people chuckled. My stomach tightened. The shift was subtle, but it was real. I gripped my fork lightly, telling myself not to react. The crowd began to laugh louder as Zinnia leaned into her rhythm. "I mean, we all love Artie's," she said, gesturing vaguely toward my table. "But you've got to admit, it's kind of like she's in a late-life crisis. Trying new things at 62, I can barely keep up." The room roared with laughter. I froze. Heat spread across my face, but I forced my lips into what I hoped looked like a polite smile. Inside, each word struck deep, as if she had peeled away my dignity in front of everyone. I stared down at my plate, nodding faintly as though in on the joke. The laughter piled higher, each wave heavier than the last. My chest tightened. This was supposed to be my daughter's night of joy, not my own public shaming. And yet here I was, the punchline of a speech I hadn't agreed to be part of. I swallowed hard, keeping tears from rising, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. When Zinnia finished, Callista stood her glass in hand. She glowed with the spotlight, her voice confident. "Thank you, Zinnia," she said, smiling toward her friend. "And yes, let's all applaud my mom. She's trying to be a CEO at 62. It's adorable, right?" The laughter erupted again, louder this time, sharper. People clapped their hands on the tables, some wiping tears of amusement from their eyes. My daughter's words had landed harder than any of Zinnia's. The sting was sharp, cutting clean through me. I sat there, my back straight, my smile faint but fixed. Every fiber of me wanted to stand and shout to remind them all who I was, what I had given. But I stayed seated, bound by the same invisible gag Callista had placed on me earlier. It wasn't the laughter alone that hurt. It was her voice, my own child's voice, joining in on the ridicule. She had chosen the crowd over her mother. Applause filled the room, and then the staff rolled in a massive cake tiers, stacked high with frosting and flowers. The spotlight followed as Callista turned eyes wide with delight. Across the cake, in glittering letters, the inscription read, "Happy Birthday, Callista." "Thanks, Avon." Cheers erupted, and Callista threw her arms around him, kissing him before the crowd. "He's incredible," she shouted over the noise. I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My gaze locked on the cake. I remembered the invoice, the meetings with the bakery, the hours I spent choosing the design. Every detail had been mine, yet my name was nowhere. My sacrifice had been wiped clean once again, replaced by someone else's glory. The applause swelled, echoing like thunder around me. I forced myself to remain seated, my smile brittle and shallow. But inside, something had already begun to break. The ballroom buzzed again as the cake was wheeled away and people drifted back to their seats. I stayed where I was. My smile fixed my posture tall. Guests began circling glasses in hand, offering what sounded like compliments but landed like knives. "You're amazing for staying active at your age," one woman said, her tone dipped in condescension. "It's sweet, you still have your little projects," another added, patting my arm lightly as if I were a child trying too hard. Each word stung, but I nodded politely, keeping my face calm. I chose silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew that in this room every protest would be twisted into more laughter. Better to let their words beat up and roll off one by one as I kept my back straight. Their small cuts tightened something inside me, but instead of breaking, it was hardening. The lights dimmed further, and the two massive screens flanking the ballroom lit up. A slideshow began glowing, words splashed across each frame. Special thanks to Dad and friends, vendors, and Callista's team. To Avon, my partner. The room erupted with applause at every line. I clapped slowly, my gaze steady. Nowhere, nowhere was my name. I saw a few guests glance my way, their smiles faltering for a second, before they turned back to the glowing screens. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass frame of a nearby photo easel, layered over the bright letters, thanking everyone else. It was almost poetic, my face hovering behind the celebration unseen, unacknowledged. I straightened again, refusing to look away. If the world wanted to erase me, then let them know I was still watching. Later, near the service corridor, I caught voices drifting through the open door. Callista's tone was cool, casual. Any extra bottles, late-hour fee, add them to Mom's card on file, she's good for it. Valora, the manager, hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. Avin chimed in, his voice smug. It's all arranged. I froze just out of sight, each word slicing sharper than the ones before. They weren't content with erasing me from the spotlight. They were digging into my pockets as well. But I didn't step in. I memorized it, the words, the tone, the time, the witnesses, every detail branded into my mind like evidence waiting for its day. The air in the hallway was cooler. I stepped out, breathing deeply, feeling the weight on my chest shift. 2 options lay before me: confront them now and become the problem, or hold the line watch and wait for the crack that would expose the whole pattern. I chose the latter. Tonight was theirs, but the reckoning would be mine. I told myself to wait just a little longer because the next thing I heard would decide everything. The host tapped the microphone, his voice booming over the soft hum of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise our glasses for the official toasts. Lights brightened on Callista as she stood gracefully, her sequined dress catching every glimmer from the chandeliers. The room hushed, expectant. She began with warmth, thanking her friends for coming, praising the vendors, and squeezing Avin's hand as she called him her rock. Applause rippled through the hall. Then her tone shifted, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. And of course my mom trying to live like she's 30 again. The sting landed before the laughter, but when the crowd erupted, it hit harder. The remark dangled in the air, wrapped in false affection but sharp enough to cut. My chest tightened as I raised my glass, the stem cold against my trembling fingers. The laughter spread like fire. She's adorable, one guest repeated loudly, drawing chuckles from the next table. At least she keeps busy, someone else chimed in, nudging their companion. I stayed still, gripping the glass tighter, the smile on my face straining into something brittle. It was as if the walls themselves echoed her words. Every repetition of her joke pressed down on me until the room felt smaller, hotter. I glanced around at the ripple of amused faces and wondered if anyone heard what I did or if they only heard the joke. Callista wasn't finished. She leaned closer to the microphone, her eyes glittering with mischief. She even tells people she's an entrepreneur. Isn't that cute? The room roared. People clapped a whistle, pierced the air, and Zinnia slapped the table, laughing harder than anyone else. My daughter beamed in the spotlight, while I sat just outside its glow, each word slicing deeper. Inside, my thoughts swirled, every sacrifice, every late night, every check I signed, erased by a single laugh line. I froze my smile in place, but behind it, something cracked. My silence was the only shield I had left, and I held it firmly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Then it happened. I caught Avin's eye across the table, my silent plea reaching toward him. The look in my eyes begged for him to step in to stop the spiral. His shoulders lifted in a small shrug, dismissive, as if to say, "That's just how she is." The message was clear. No one would come to my defense. Not tonight, not here. The laughter faded slowly, replaced by clinking glasses and the shuffle of servers clearing plates. I swallowed hard, each movement deliberate, every breath measured. Alone in a crowd, I realized this was no longer just about humiliation. It was about endurance. I excused myself to the hallway, needing air before the walls of laughter suffocated me. The ballroom doors shut behind me with a muted thud, sealing in the laughter that still rang in my ears. I leaned against the cool wall of the corridor, trying to steady my chest. My breaths came shallow at first, each inhale catching against the knot in my throat. The muffled music seeped through the doors, along with faint bursts of laughter that replayed my daughter's words, as if on a cruel loop. I pressed my hand to the wall, grounding myself, though my body felt hollow like the sound itself had hollowed me out. For a moment I closed my eyes, and the image of her smiling, mocking me under the chandeliers burned so clearly it was as though she had followed me out here. Exhaustion washed over me, not the kind a night's sleep could cure, but the deep, aching fatigue of being unseen for too long. The air in the hallway was dim, tinged with the scent of wax polish and faint perfume from passing guests. I thought I was alone, but then footsteps echoed. 2 guests slipped out, laughing as though they carried the party with them. They didn't see me at first, half hidden in the shadow of a pillar. She's like my aunt with her Etsy crafts. One snickered, lighting a cigarette just outside the door. The other chuckled, replying, "At least she pays for things." Their laughter was light, careless, but the words landed heavy. They glanced past me without a pause, without recognition, as if I were part of the furniture. Their heels clicked away, leaving silence more cutting than the insult itself. I straightened, but my body felt transparent, their words lingering like smoke that clung to the skin. The sound of measured footsteps pulled me back. Valora, the hotel manager, approached with her practiced smile. She held a small tablet against her side and spoke in a tone too polite to be kind. "Mrs. Artis, per your daughter's instructions, all additional charges for the evening extra bottles, late-hour fees, have been moved to your account on file." My hand trembled, but I folded it into my shawl, hiding the shake. "Of course," I said softly. I asked no questions, though. Inside my mind, I repeated every word, etched them onto the wall of memory. Her voice, Avon's earlier nudge, the hesitation before agreement, each detail I tucked away. Evidence, a ledger written not in ink but in the casual cruelty of others. Valora offered a quick nod, already turning back to her duties, the weight of the charges dismissed as routine. To her, I was only an invisible sponsor necessary but never acknowledged. Alone once more, I drifted toward the glass door at the end of the corridor. The dim light pooled there, and in the reflection I saw myself faded, almost ghost-like, against the glittering backdrop of the ballroom beyond. My eyes lingered on that image, a woman dressed for her daughter's milestone, standing alone, erased from her own story. For a moment sorrow pressed hard against my chest, but then slowly my spine straightened. In that fragile reflection I saw not absence, but possibility. They could ignore me, laugh at me, drain me, but I was still here. And if tonight I seemed invisible, it would not last. I would not remain erased. Quietly, I smoothed the front of my jacket and drew in one long breath, sharper than the ones before. I straightened my jacket, determined that the next words I spoke would not be wasted. I slipped back into the ballroom, the heavy doors closing behind me like a curtain. The air buzzed with chatter and the glitter of glassware. My return drew no notice. The applause from earlier had faded into a warm murmur. Then Celine lifted her hand, her voice ringing bright and sure. "Everyone, just one more toast." My stomach tightened. I sank into my chair and folded my napkin as if it could steady me. I told myself, "Breathe, stay still, hold your line." Celine stepped forward, a flute in her hand, her smile glossy under the lights. "To youth," she said, pausing for effect, "and to keeping it alive even when others try to drag us backward." Laughter bubbled. She leaned into the mic, playful, pointed. "And to mothers who think they're 30, still chasing dreams, still burning money on vanity projects." A ripple of uneasy chuckles moved across the room. Some laughed too hard, others looked down at their plates. My fingers pressed crescent moons into the linen beneath my glass, a quiet map of restraint. She basked in the sound, the way some people warm their hands over a fire. I watched the flame catch table to table until the room glowed with it. My chest tightened. The ache wasn't new. It was the old ache of being tolerated, but not respected, invited, and yet sidelined. I sipped water, felt it settle cool and stubborn in my throat. I counted my breaths. I reminded myself why I had paid for this night, not to be praised, but so my daughter could celebrate without worry. Still, the cost kept growing in ways no invoice ever lists. The laughter dipped, and a softer voice threaded through it. Narina leaned toward her neighbor, barely moving her lips. She should be grateful her daughter keeps her around at all, she whispered. The line dropped like a pin into crystal. I heard it clearly. Gratitude for being allowed near my own child, what a small ring to stand inside. I kept my gaze on the stage, my face calm. Inside, humiliation cooled into something denser, like glass poured and left to set. It would not shatter. It would hold shape. A server passed behind me with plates that smelled of butter and rosemary. The mundane scent steadied me. I noticed the small things, the drip of wax hardening on a votive, the way the spotlight whitened Celine's knuckles around her glass, the tremor in the microphone when she laughed too close. Details were anchors. Details were proof. I had been collecting them all evening without breaking the surface. I felt eyes on me and turned slightly. Melis Narina's mother sat near the stage, posture, straight hands folded. She wasn't laughing. Her mouth was a firm line, her gaze moving from Celine to me and back again, reading the space between words the way a good reader studies the margins. She saw the pattern. I could tell. In her face there was no pity, only recognition, and it reached me across the room like a steady hand. A small current of relief moved through my ribs. Celine cleared her throat and rapped with a flourish, soaking in the applause. To tonight, she said, and to knowing when to pass the torch. Glasses clinked. A few guests peered my way quickly, guiltily. I straightened my shoulders and set the napkin down, edges aligned. My silence had never been consent. It had been strategy. The difference matters, especially to those who misread quiet as weakness. Narina leaned again, voice a low blade. If my mom ever pulled that, I'd cut her off. The guest beside her winced, then forced a smile. The music swelled as if on cue, a pleasant coverlet thrown over something sharp. I let the sound wash past. I had stood in stronger weather than this. Across the tables, Melis lifted her chin as if testing the weight of a decision. Her eyes found mine and held. In that look was something I had not been offered all night: respect without theatrics. The room's noise thinned for me the way surf seems to fall back before a break. I knew change travels quietly until it doesn't. Celine set down the mic. A breath of relief moved through the crowd. I folded my hands, feeling the steadiness return to my bones. The mirror in the corridor had shown me a ghost. This moment showed me a spine. I would remember both. Between the clapping and the chatter, I noticed the quiet labor that holds parties together, the busser who replaced a fallen fork without being seen, the florist who slipped in to right a tilting stem, the night manager checking a dimmer to spare the older guests' eyes. In their small kindnesses, I saw the kind of care that never makes a speech. I thought of the hours I had spent choosing linen shades, squaring invoices, confirming dietary notes, so no one would feel like a burden. None of that needed a microphone. It only needed good faith. And yet good faith was the one thing that kept being taken from me tonight, filleted by jokes and shrugs, until even the bones looked decorative. I steadied my breath and decided the only thing I would give now was time. Time for truth to catch up. Time for people to hear themselves in replay when the laughter died down. Time is a better teacher than pride. It waits and it does not forget. I placed my palm flat on the table, felt the grain beneath lacquer, and let that texture remind me who I am. I caught Melis's gaze, and in that moment I sensed she was about to do something no one expected. The ballroom hummed with a strange tension after Selena's last toast. The laughter that had filled the room just minutes ago now seemed to hang awkwardly in the air, echoing like a reminder of every wound it had carved into me. I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap, but my heart thumped against my ribs. I had endured silence, endured humiliation, endured the whispers. I was prepared to carry it alone, and then I saw her. Melis rose slowly from her chair, one hand resting on the polished back for balance. The scrape of wood against the floor sliced through the noise of clinking glasses and chatter. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even Selene's bright expression faltered her eyes, narrowing as though she hadn't planned for this interruption. The air tightened. My breath caught in my throat. Dread stirred first. What if this was another blow, but then beneath it, a flicker of something I hadn't felt all night, hope. Melis didn't look at me. She looked straight at Selene, her chin lifted. Her voice was not loud, but it carried clearly. "I must speak," she said, every syllable deliberate. "I am disappointed. Deeply. To mock your own mother, to laugh at her in front of friends, family, and strangers, this is not wit. This is not celebration. This is shame." A ripple ran through the guests. People glanced at one another, shifting in their seats. Some frowned. Others pressed their lips thin. Selene blinked, the corners of her smile twitching, but her jaw tightened. I felt a tremor inside me, not of fear, but of vindication. Someone else saw. Someone else had the courage to say it aloud. The room held still as Melis continued. "Look around you. Look at these chandeliers, these linens, this meal you are enjoying. Who made this possible?" She swept her arm toward the hall, the flowers, the cake, the glow of the lights. "Would any of us be here tonight if not for your mother?" She gave her time, her effort, her resources. She created this night so you could shine, and you repay her by cutting her down in front of everyone. Her words struck like stones against glass. The laughter that had once spilled so freely died altogether. Forks paused halfway to mouths. People lowered their eyes. I watched Selene stiffen her shoulders, drawn tight, as though the dress she wore had suddenly grown heavy. For the first time, the crowd was no longer with her. Melis let the silence deepen, then turned her gaze. She met my eyes across the table, steady, unwavering. There was no pity in that look, only recognition, respect, and something sharper truth. She nodded slightly, then spoke again. "This woman has done far more than any of you realize, more than you've given her credit for tonight. And the way she has been treated in this room by her own daughter, no less ought to make every one of you think twice." Her voice carried, and the words spread through the room like a wave. A murmur rose, not of laughter now, but of guilt, of shifting awareness. I felt my chest tighten as though air was rushing back into lungs I hadn't realized were starved. Exposed, yes, but not erased. I sat taller, my back straightening without effort. Selene's face blanched, the color draining as her hand tightened around her glass. Her power, the power she had wielded so casually, was slipping away in front of everyone. I saw Selene's face blanch as Melis's words rippled through the room, and I knew the balance of power had shifted. The ballroom, once filled with chatter and the echo of laughter, now seemed frozen in air that felt heavy enough to choke. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped in my lap so tightly that the knuckles burned. The microphone passed into Melis's hand, and for the first time that evening, it felt as though the entire room belonged to someone other than my daughter. Her voice, calm and deliberate, carried easily through the hush. "I would like to settle a matter," she said, her tone neither mocking nor apologetic. "A simple matter of courtesy. Tonight has been beautiful, but beauty is hollow without honesty. Before we go further, let's be clear about who made all of this possible." A current of whispers rippled among the tables. My pulse tightened. I drew in a measured breath, forcing myself not to lean forward, not to betray the hope forming in my chest. She gestured toward Valora, the venue manager who had been lingering at the edge of the stage. Perhaps the manager can clarify this for everyone. Just one question: who arranged and funded tonight's celebration? Selene sprang to her feet, laughter too bright, too sharp, spilling from her lips. "This is unnecessary," she said, her voice quivering with the strain of performance. "It's inappropriate to drag money into a birthday toast. Honestly, Mother wouldn't want this." Her eyes darted to mine, pleading for obedience, but I did not move. Melis did not break her gaze. "Respect," she replied evenly, "is not a game. It begins with honesty." Her attention returned to Valora. "Please for clarity." Valora stepped forward. her hands folded, eyes flicking between Celine and me. The pause stretched thick as molasses. Celine shook her head, but no words followed. At last, Valora exhaled and spoke each syllable weighted. "The contract was signed in the name of Mrs. Artis," she said. "My name, my truth, spoken aloud. The reservation, the deposits, and the credit card on file all belong to her." A collective gasp ran through the room like air sucked out of dozens of lungs at once. She turned a page in the folder she carried. In recent weeks, several add-on charges, extra bottles extended hours. Additional decor were approved by Miss Selene, but each billed to Mrs. Artis's card. All documented, all time-stamped. Her voice never wavered, factual and precise. The reaction was immediate. Guests exchanged startled looks, some sinking into their chairs. Narina dropped her gaze to her folded hands. Selena's face drained of color, her lips parting without sound. Each fact struck like a gavel, pounding the lie into fragments. I sat still, the storm around me no longer mine to hold. Vindication seared through me, sharp, undeniable. Valora closed the folder and stepped back, silence following her retreat. No applause came, no toast, only the heavy weight of truth settling across the room. For the first time, eyes did not search me for weakness. They turned instead toward Celine, toward her silence, her shrinking frame beneath the spotlight. I stood slowly, not to gloat, not to triumph, but to honor the moment. My voice was quiet, steady. "Thank you," I said, inclining my head toward Valora. Then I sat again, shoulders squared, breathing evenly. Celine opened her mouth, searching for a way to reclaim the room, to spin the story back into her hands. Nothing came. Every phrase she might have used sounded too small, too brittle, against the truth that had already settled. Her gaze fell to the floor. I didn't raise my voice, only my boundaries. The microphone sat cool in my hand, the room holding its breath with me. I didn't ask for attention. I let the quiet do the work. Glass stems settled. Someone cleared a throat. I lifted my chin and kept my voice level. "Thank you for being here to celebrate my daughter," I said. No apology, no preface. I let the words stand on their own feet. Then I looked at Callista. Not long enough to humiliate her, only long enough to make the point that I was finished pretending not to notice. Respect doesn't have an expiration date. The sentence landed with a soft, undeniable weight. A few heads tipped. One man's smile fell into a thoughtful line. Zinnia's laugh withered in her glass. Avon adjusted his cufflinks, the small, nervous ritual of a man who had run out of brave things to say. Near the wall, Malus met my eye and gave the faintest nod, the kind of approval only a mother gives when she recognizes another mother's line in the sand. I added one more truth, measured and clean. Tonight is about joy, not humiliation. I didn't explain what had already been proved. I didn't recount the contract or the credit card. The room knew. I turned slightly toward the edge of the stage. "Valora," I said, keeping my tone courteous, professional, and public. "Please note, effective 9:30 p.m., no additional charges are to be added to my account." The manager stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Understood, Miss Artis," she replied, voice carrying without strain. The formality was not theater. It was a record. Avon stilled. Zinnia blinked at the floor. Someone near the bar exhaled as if a tight seam had finally given. What happened here would be remembered not as drama, but as a simple correction of course. I returned to the crowd. "Let's hold on to what's good tonight," I said. "Let's go home remembering that." I set the microphone back in its cradle. No flourish, no bow, just a click like a lock turning. On the way to my chair, the air felt clearer, as if the room had opened a window I hadn't noticed. Callista's mouth moved before her pride could stop it. "Thank you, Mom." The words were small, but they were honest. I didn't ask for more. Music swelled again, softer than before, as if a hand had turned the evening down to a humane volume. Conversation resumed in careful threads. Laughter thinned into a companionable murmur. The party survived the truth, which is more than most parties can say. I sat and folded my napkin across my lap. My hands were steady now. I watched people decide who they wanted to be for the rest of the night. Some chose graciousness. Some chose silence. A few chose their phones. I chose the cake. It arrived in slices instead of spectacle, and that suited me. I tasted the lemon and thought about all the years I had baked quietly, iced quietly, paid quietly. I did not taste bitterness. What I tasted was the clean edge of a boundary finally drawn. A server paused by my shoulder. "May I bring coffee?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And could you make sure the staff takes a break? It's been a long night." Her smile reached her eyes. Small mercies count, and they count twice on nights like this. Across the room, Callista stood with Zinnia and Avon speaking in low tones. She glanced at me, then away, then back again. I could read the conflict on her face, the reflex to defend herself, wrestling with the knowledge that defense would only dig the hole deeper. Growth rarely announces itself with trumpets. Usually it begins with a pause. Melis drifted close enough to be a presence without being an intrusion. "Good line," she murmured when our paths crossed. "Needed saying," I answered. "Needed hearing," she said, and moved on, leaving me with the warm certainty that I had not imagined the cruelty or the turn. The band eased into a gentle standard. Couples swayed. I didn't dance. I let the music fill the spaces the laughter had once occupied. I let my shoulders settle my breath, find a patient rhythm. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was letting the evening learn how to behave. At 9:30 on the dot, Valora approached a clipboard tucked to her side. "Per your instruction, no further charges will be authorized," she said. "We'll finalize at the original amount." "Thank you," I replied. It would have been easy to add a speech about gratitude and respect and all the invisible work mothers do, but I had already said everything that needed saying. The rest would be measured in how people behaved tomorrow. Callista came to me near the end. The room had thinned. The band was packing chords into cases. She stood with her hands folded the way she did when she was 8 and caught in a lie she didn't mean to tell. I didn't think she began. "Now you will," I said gently. "Tonight isn't ruined. It's corrected." She blinked. "Are we—" "Okay, we're not broken," I said. "We are adjusting the terms. No drama, no punishment, just new math." She nodded a small, jerky motion, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was not a grand apology, but it was a step onto solid ground. I looked around the room one more time, the chandelier light now warm instead of blinding, the staff easing their weight off their feet, the last guests saying genuine goodnights. The night didn't end with a cheer. It ended with a course correction. As the music softened to silence, I felt the balance tilt toward consequence and toward peace. I woke to a house that sounded like it remembered me. The old air conditioner hummed, the coffee maker clicked awake, and the blinds let in thin bands of Texas sun that laid across my kitchen table like ribbons. I set one mug down and waited for the first drip, counting the beats, the way I used to count my daughter's breaths when she was a baby and sleep was fragile. The phone on the counter shivered to life, a nervous animal. A buzz, then another, then a stack of banners tumbling across the screen. I did not touch it. I wrapped my hands around the empty mug and let the heat of the machine warm my fingers. Silence used to feel lonely. This morning, it felt earned. I breathed in out. The coffee began to pour, steady and dark, and the scent rose like a memory of better days, bake sales, carpool lines, birthday candles blown out in one confident breath. I poured a cup and sat. One buzz became a chorus. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard popped. I told myself I would finish the first sip before I looked at anything. I wanted the day to know I belonged to it, not to a screen. I slid the phone toward me with the fatalism of someone lifting a curtain. The lock screen was a mosaic of names, cousins from Dallas co-workers I had met once at a holiday party, neighbors who preferred waves to conversations and numbers without contacts that announced themselves with urgency. Clips, tags, mentions. Someone had filmed the toasts. Someone had caught the moment the manager read the contract. Someone had slowed the video so every blink looked like confession. I tapped a message from my sister first. Call me when you can. People are being unfair, but also, maybe you shouldn't have, 3 dots pulsed, then vanished. I opened another from a nephew, a link to a thread titled, "When Moms Don't Know Their Place," with a row of laughing emojis he probably sent without thinking. A coworker wrote, "Saw the clip. Hope you're okay," then asked if I could send her the contact for the florist. The notifications didn't stop. My phone warmed in my palm. A video auto-played my posture at a table, composed and unforgiving. My daughter's grin stretched too wide, the crowd folding into laughter like a wave. The audio carried words I knew by their shape, even when my kitchen speaker kept them soft. I swiped away the sound and let the images move without voices. It was worse that way, like watching a storm from behind glass, unable to warn anyone and choosing not to run. I locked the screen and set the phone face down, but it continued to tremble against the wood, asking for my attention like a child who learned that noise wins. I turned it over again when her name appeared. Callista. The preview showed the first line of a text. Sorry if it looked bad last night. I opened it and read slowly, giving each word the weight she refused to give. Mom, sorry if it looked bad. You know I love you. The party got carried away. I wish you hadn't made things tense with the contract part. People were judging. Let's just not make this worse. Please don't post anything. Lunch this week, I read it twice, then a third time, for the spaces between sentences, the places where responsibility should live and did not. I typed then erased. I didn't make it tense. Truth did. I typed then erased. Respect doesn't have an expiration date. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, hovering over years of reflexes. Fix it, soften it, buy peace with silence. The phone buzzed again, a string of hearts from someone I barely knew, a tag from Zinnia's account. Her caption said, "Iconic night over a still of me, holding a glass I never wanted to raise." I set the phone on the table and pressed my palm over it as if I could calm it the way you soothe an engine that's rattling itself loose. In the window, the blinds drew little ladders of light across the sink. I listened to the tick of the wall clock. I told myself that answering quickly had never saved me before, and it wouldn't save me now. Another vibration came shorter, almost shy, a name I had met only at tables and carpool lanes mailless. Her message was not long. You deserved better. You were the strongest person in that room. If you need a witness to last night, I'm here. I let the screen rest in my lap and felt for a brief, unguarded second my chest loosen as if a band had been snipped. I whispered, "Thank you," to an empty kitchen that didn't argue. I thought about how strength looks nothing like what the internet edits it to be. It looks like paying deposits when no one asks how they appeared. It looks like learning to breathe through laughter that isn't kind. It looks like choosing which words to spend and which to save. I made another cup of coffee and rinsed the first mug as if resetting a clock. The phone stayed quiet for a blessed minute. I opened the Notes app not to write a reply, but to write a boundary. I listed what I would no longer fund without respect, what I would no longer swallow without naming. I wrote, "I can love you and also say no." I wrote, "I will not be shamed for growing at my age." I wrote, "Joy belongs to the people who keep it safe." When I finished, the kitchen light shifted to warmer gold. I closed my phone knowing the real answer wasn't in texts. It had to come from me. Before the kettle cooled, I opened the calendar and blocked a quiet hour for therapy, a walk and groceries, small squares of care, my way of keeping faith. Okay? The morning light reached through the blinds in thin, deliberate lines, touching the edges of my kitchen table. I brewed coffee the way I always did, but this time I opened my journal instead of the paper. I wrote 3 sentences, short, sharp, not dressed in apology. 1, respect me in public. 2, be honest about finances and credit. 3, no charges to my accounts without my written consent. Beneath them, I wrote, if these are crossed, I will step back. I didn't cross out, didn't soften, didn't add. Maybe. These weren't threats. They were the ground I had finally built under myself. The steam from my cup curled into the air like punctuation, and for the first time in years, my hand didn't shake when I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Calm clarity settled in my chest. My house, once a place I tiptoed through, felt sturdy again. That afternoon, I sat on the porch listening to the creak of the swing and the soft thud of footsteps approaching. Callista stood at the edge of the steps, her eyes darting from my face to the journal resting on my lap. She started with excuses. The night was too loud. People expected jokes, but her words fell away. Her shoulders lowered. She said my name, not Mom, but Artie's. Then she named them one by one. The jokes, the cake inscription, the contract she let others pretend belonged to someone else. She said, "I'm sorry," without a but trailing after it. I let the silence do its work. I asked only one question. What changes now? The pause was heavier than any speech. She swallowed and answered, "How I treat you, starting with crediting you when I should, and never letting money erase your name again." The air between us, once raw, began to breathe. I rose and went inside, returning with a single printed page. I placed it on the porch table between us. It was not a threat. It was a map, a reimbursement plan for the add-ons to the venue, a line that read, "No future events, charged to my accounts. Another 8 sessions of therapy together, and one more. If public speaking involves me, I approve the words beforehand." I explained calmly, "This is how we heal, or this is how we rest apart." She read, lips pressed together, then took a pen from her purse and signed. She whispered, "I'll cover the rest of the venue balance myself." I nodded. The sound of her pen on paper was as sharp and final as scissors through a thread. It wasn't revenge, it was release. 2 weeks later, we sat at a modest bistro tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. No chandeliers, no microphones, just the clatter of cutlery and the hum of conversation from strangers who didn't care who we were. Malis joined us briefly, lifting her glass toward me. To the woman who paid twice, once with money, once with grace. I smiled, the kind that didn't need hiding. Callista slid a handwritten card across the table. "Thank you, Mom," it read. No hashtags, no stage lights, no audience, just the words she should have given the first time. I tucked it into my bag. The dinner was small, but my chest felt larger than any ballroom. I didn't rewrite history, I set its margins. And for the first time, the story was mine to keep. I didn't get the daughter I imagined that night, I got the boundaries we both needed. And sometimes, that's the beginning of love that finally grows up. Looking back, I realized this story was never just about a birthday. It was about learning to stand in my own dignity, even when the people closest to me forgot it. As a mother, I spent years giving without asking, but I finally understood love without respect only leaves you empty. My hope is that you watching this remember to draw your own boundaries, to protect your worth, and to teach your children that gratitude and respect never expire. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand tall even against family? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched your heart, leave me a comment, type 1, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories that speak to life, family, and resilience, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what's next.